Hello, my name is Diane, and today we're going to talk about some of the books coming out in July. I have 7 books to talk about. Most of them are fantasy. I do have one sci-fi graphic novel, and only one of these is a sequel, so the rest of them are either standalones or first in series, which are my favorite to talk about because anybody can get into them if they sound interesting. You don't need any backing of previous books in the series. That being said, let's get right into what we have coming out. Starting with July 2nd is The Failures by Benjamin Lyer. This is the first book in a planned trilogy. The story takes place in the Wanderlands, which is a vast machine that no one knows what it was built for, but it has begun failing and going dark piece by piece. Within this world, we have a group of adventurers who have all been summoned by a dream that they have to this underground keep, and they will gather there and be given some purpose. Below the keep is a giant that has been locked in a cage by magicians and gods, and this giant is very powerful, and its purpose was the annihilation of civilization. So in this failing Wanderlands, this is a very dangerous but also very desirable amount of power for some people there to have and pursue. And this story will follow those who may either see the Wanderlands go entirely dark or potentially restore it and bring it back to life. I think this story sounds very interesting. I think the synopsis sounds very interesting. It's just enough to keep me intrigued. Sounds like it's going to be a bit of a darker fantasy, that the characters' decisions could go either way and what happens with this place. But there's not too much information on who these people are and what exactly is going on or potentially going to happen. And for me, I really like knowing just kind of the basics of a story and what I might expect going in without knowing too much about it, that I'm getting to have very specific expectations. Following that, coming out on July 9th, is These Deathless Shores by P.H. Lowe. This is a Peter Pan retelling following Jordan, who was formerly a lost boy, but she is now 20 years old and has returned to real life, and she is experiencing withdrawal still from the magic dust that they all had while they were on the island in Neverland. And Jordan now is returning to Neverland to face Peter once and for all on her own terms. It sounds like Peter might not be the good guy in this story, or maybe our main character is not the good guy in this story. I don't particularly like Peter Pan or Peter Pan retellings. I don't dislike them, but they're not something that I'm necessarily drawn to. But I think it's always interesting to see these stories that a lot of people know quite well from when they were younger, and having authors put their own spin on those worlds. So I'm curious to see. It sounds like this author has made some changes to Neverland and probably Peter from the version that most people would know. So I'm curious to see what is changed about this Neverland and why and how Jordan chooses to go back and face whatever happened to her there. Also coming out on July 9th is The Price of Redemption by Sean Carpenter. This is the first in a series. The story follows a Marquess called Enid, and she is escaping her homeland following a revolution. However, the ship that was taking her to safety is taken over by a ship from the revolution, and she is only just spared being captured when another ship comes and intervenes. Enid is taken on to replace the recently slain mage of the ship that saved her, and since she has powerful magic, she fills that role underneath the captain's command and finds herself adjusting to this new life at sea, and also learning that the revolution was not just where she was in her homeland on shore. I think this sounds interesting. Sounds like there may be some politics going on with this revolution. I like a story about a revolution. I also don't read many of them because I don't find that I come across them much, but I do like stories set at sea. I think it's a very interesting setting. So we will see how Enid adjusts to this and learn a bit more about the revolution, why it came about, and if it's going to be successful, or if Enid will be at sea forever. Then coming out on July 16th, this is the one sequel I mentioned and the one I'm probably the most excited about coming out next month, and that is Le Fay by Sophie Keach. This is the sequel to Morgan Is My Name. This series, which is going to be a trilogy, is the retelling of the story of Morgan Le Fay, beginning with her early life. That first book, Morgan Is My Name, followed her from her early life as a young girl when Uther Pendragon becomes her stepfather, and following her life through adulthood and returning to her home. So this book picks up where that book ended, and Morgan has returned to Camelot, now an adult. And I really enjoyed the first book. I like Arthurian retellings, I like the character of Morgan, and I really enjoyed Sophie Keach's writing, so I'm very excited to just get more of it and see how Morgan continues to develop, where this version of Morgan is going to end up throughout her adult life. Also coming out on July 16th is The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. This is also an Arthurian retelling. This follows a young knight called Callum who comes to Camelot hoping to prove himself to join the Knights of the Round Table. However, he arrives finding that he is too late. The king was killed 2 weeks ago, and there are only a few of the Knights of the Round Table left. The knights that are left are not the heroic ones that everybody knows and looks up to. They're the oddballs who were maybe a little less deserving than some of their peers. Together they are joined by Nimue, and this ragtag group comes together to try and rebuild Camelot and get some sense of order in the wake of everything that has happened. So the story follows the group as they try and put Camelot back together, try and solve all of the many problems that it's facing right now, while also figuring out what exactly happened to King Arthur. Again, I really like Arthurian retellings. I think this sounds like an interesting take on Camelot, following the after events with some of the lesser known characters from the Round Table and having them join up for some reason with Nimue. Sounds like it'll be a new part of the story with some familiar characters. Also on July 16th is A Rose by Any Other Name by Mary McMine, as well as a main character, Rose, who, after her father dies, the nobles accuse her and her friend of witchcraft, and she has to flee to this household of respected alchemists. Eventually, they also have to escape there, casting charms along the way and selling astrological advice. Eventually, this life leads them to meet a noble called Henry and a playwright, Will Shakespeare. I don't know too much about William Shakespeare's actual life, so I don't know how much of this is going to follow his actual life or if it's just inspired by some of his writings, as implied by the title of the book, and he just happens to be the playwright within it. But whether or not it follows any of his real life, I know that I like Mary McMine's writing. I enjoyed her writing in the Book of Gothel, so I'm wanting to see what she does with this next book. And the final book I want to talk about, coming out on July 23rd, is Space Mullet by Daniel Warren Johnson. This is an episodic sci-fi graphic novel following an ex-space marine called Jonah and his alien co-pilot Alpheus, and we see them trying and usually failing to do some good in the galaxy. I like sci-fi graphic novels. It sounds like it's going to be very silly and lighthearted, and I'm into that. Let me know if you're looking forward to any of these or if there's something else that you're most anticipating. Otherwise, that's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.